Blog post number 5. Back day with Dorian, a lesson in form and humility. Hi, I'm Paul Baxter-Nell and welcome to blog post number 5. This week we're going back in time yet again to 1993. And yes, we're going back to the dungeon. We're going to reminisce about my first back training day with Dorian. But first, a few words about improvement from the Greek philosopher Socrates. You see, it's nothing new to wish to find a method to improve yourself, whether physically or mentally or emotionally. From the early civilizations, humankind has been on a never-ending quest to improve oneself. Well, the leaders have always done so anyway. But what does Socrates say? Just as one person delights in improving his farm, and another his horse, so I delight in attending to my own improvement day by day. I'd had a few training sessions, mostly leg sessions with Dorian, when he wanted a third partner in the mix, alongside Kenny. But we'd also trained chest and biceps and shoulders and triceps by then, but I had yet to train back with him, and back was a lagging body part for me. So I was chomping at the bit to get the nod, to get the chance to join him for back day. Anyway, so I was beginning to adapt to their heavy-duty, high-intensity style of training. Well, when I say adapt, you never quite get used to high-intensity training, which is kind of the point, really. But I was getting used to understanding that I had one chance once a week to make each muscle grow. And that meant only 50 weeks a year, if I counted impossible holidays or sickness. So I always banked on 50 workouts for each body part a year. Well, this is how I worked it out. I knew that we trained each body part every 6 or 7 days, depending on how much rest Dorian wanted. So I equated that it was roughly 1 workout per week per body part, which gave me the 50 workouts a year. Or 1 chance per week to get it right and grow, which when you break it down like that makes getting up and ready to give your all, your every living, breathing, growing fibre, a massive jolt of insane adaptation signals to every working set. Very easy. I couldn't waste 1 set, let alone 1 workout. So my mindset changed immediately in the way I was approaching my training, and it still hasn't quite left me. Even now, after all these years. Still to this day, I find I can't talk to anyone when I'm in the gym. I move around the gym with my baseball cap down, covering my eyes, so I don't really make eye contact with people. I'm kind of subtly giving them the message, please don't talk to me, I'm training. Or if I do talk to someone, I find it difficult and it feels kind of wrong. This might be a good point at which to explain how I used to prepare for a workout back then when I was competing. Originally, before that, it was just a case of turning up at the gym, knowing what I was going to train, and getting to it. But by the time I was training with Dorian and Kenny, I learned that in order to maximize the success of the workout, then I was going to have to treat the workout as though it was the most important part of the day. And with due respect, prepare for it as though it was that significant, meaning that just turning up wasn't the optimal way to approach it anymore. I had to start preparing for it as though it was an event worthy of preparation, just like I would a business meeting or a big date. I was going to have to sit down and plan it, get my mindset right, and ensure I was both physically and mentally prepared. So from the moment I walked through the gym doors, I was already in the process, in the zone, in the workout itself. This is how I used to do it. But before we do so, what do the Stoics tell us about preparation, victory, and moving on to your next goal? Such a person, having done a good deed, won't go shouting from the rooftops, but simply moves on to the next deed. Just like the vine produces another bunch of grapes, in the right season? Well, firstly, I would ensure as far as possible that I would train at the same time of day every workout, every training day. Not only would this make the preparation process easier, but it also got my body in the habit of habituating when I was training with regards to my circadian rhythms. What I found over the years was that if I trained at the same time of day on training days, my body gradually became accustomed to preparing itself for that extreme work by beginning to produce an endocrine response at the same time of day. For example, if I was training at around 10:30 in the morning, which I've always done, except for the time when I was in Australia when I used to train at about 5 or 6 in the morning, just because it was so hot. I used to train at Terry Mitsos's gym in Sydenham, Sydney back then, and what a great but sweltering hot gym he's got there. Terry's an ex-NABBA and an IFBB pro, and he's got the best gym in that part of Sydney. Well, more on that on a future blog post, I think. Anyway, so training at 10:30 every day meant that over time my body began to preempt the hormonal response it would be producing during the workout to cope with the effort, aggression and physical intensity, which is why if you normally train at a certain time of day and then suddenly change to a different time, you often don't feel quite right. It's a true physiological response that your body is giving, so I made sure I was going to take advantage of it. Knowing I was training at 10:30 meant that back then, and still to this day actually, I had time for 2 meals before the training session began, and still leave a good hour and a half for the meal to go down before I trained. Eating or drinking anything anytime sooner would have meant that I would have simply just lost the meal by throwing it up or simply feeling really uncomfortable during the workout, which is not the best way to maximize your workout. So waking at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m., depending on whether I was off season or pre-contest, I either did half an hour of cardio on an empty stomach if I was pre-contest, or I prepared my meals for the day if not, and then eating my breakfast of a bowl of porridge oats with 2 scoops of protein powder for my breakfast. Now this has been my breakfast for well over 30 years and I still love it today, even though the size of that bowl has changed quite dramatically as my body weight that I'm holding is a lot lower than it used to be. It's gone from a kind of mixing bowl size of bowl of porridge to a normal cereal bowl of porridge oats in the morning. After breakfast and food preparation for the day, I would then go down to the gym and open up, or I would go to work. This was the period where I was transitioning from working in an office to when I was opening up and starting my first gym. So, or it was one of the 3 days a week where I was driving up to Birmingham to train at Temple. Regardless of where I was at, whether I was at my gym, at work, or parked in the multi-storey car park in Birmingham, I would have my second meal at 9:30 a.m, which was just a simple meal of chicken, rice and broccoli. The amount again depending on where I was in the season, but always light enough to clear my stomach by 10:30. And my stomach would feel empty when the workout would begin. The big eating always happened after the workout. And it normally happened in the food court at the Bull Ring, just 5 minutes from Temple, where Kenny and I would go to the food court and have a huge refuel while Dorian would always drive home to have his post-workout meal. Now from 9:45 to 10:15, I would either lock myself in the office at the gym or sneakily take a cigarette break, even though I didn't smoke. In the office, whoever didn't smoke was always allowed an extra 5 or 10 minutes here and there to compensate. I guess times have changed. Or I would sit in my car and mentally prepare myself for the workout to come. This was always a combination of visualizing the workout ahead, imagining the weight I was going to use that day, even try mentally feel how heavy the dumbbells would feel in my hands when I picked them up. And I would replay the set through my head a couple of times so that by the time of the real workout, it almost felt like I'd already done it. So I convinced myself that I knew it was possible to get the number of reps I had imagined in my head beforehand. On great days, those especially with Dorian and Kenny, I would normally exceed both the weight and the number of reps I managed to get with it. That's how inspiring those gentlemen were. I would then sit and think about the last workout. Had I given it my all? Did I leave anything behind that day? If so, then it was time to repay the debt I owed to myself and ensure I was going to grow from this one workout. Remember, I had only 50 chances each year to get this workout in and grow that body part. Then I would often sit and flick through some old magazines, some Flex magazine or Muscular Development, and look at the pros and get even more inspired. These were the guys I wanted to be competing against one day. So to see them in colour, looking freaky, contest ready, shredded, was always inspirational. But no more so than reminding myself I was about to take a 10-minute walk from the car to Temple Street to train with Mr. Olympia. And that was sure to get the butterflies going in my stomach. If it was a back or leg day, I would take 2 ephedrine tablets, 4 Pro Plus and half an aspirin at about 11:15, and then slowly make my way to those beckoning red doors or outside into my own gym, where everybody would be aware that Mr. B was training today, so there was going to be some electricity and some aggression around. The music would be pumped up even louder, and they were going to witness some insanity for a while. Otherwise, it was a case of waiting outside those red doors for Dorian to arrive in his car, or for Kenny to walk around the corner. That's how I prepared for my workouts. Now let's get back to the story of my first back day with the king of backs, Mr. Yates. I was resting in my bedroom one evening, as was usual after a hard day's work and training, when I heard the telephone ring downstairs. Now, I didn't have that many friends back then. A few mates around the country, a few women friends and buddies in the industry up north, but I knew my mother or father would probably be the likely recipient of the call, so I just relaxed and carried on with my growing, resting, snoozing. My father answered the phone. Yes, we didn't have mobile phones back then, just a landline, and he called from downstairs. "Paul, it's Dorian for you." Dorian? The last time I trained with him and Kenny, he'd asked for my phone number, as he said Kenny occasionally had to miss sessions due to his work as a security guard in one of the stores in Birmingham. But I never really thought he would actually phone me. I was wrong. My brain was in overload, and for a second I was in shock, but I quickly got myself together and ran as well as a 21-stone man can run down the stairs and picked up the receiver. "Hello? Hi Paul, it's Dorian. Can you train tomorrow? It's back day." I had work the next day, but I wasn't going to miss this. And work were getting used to me taking my annual holidays one day at a time to go and train in Birmingham anyway. So I answered as coolly as I could, "Yeah, sure. Normal time?" "Yeah, thanks, Paul. Around 10:30. I'll see you there. See you in the morning." And that was it. Back day was on. And this time, it was just going to be me and the shadow. Kenny wasn't going to be there to hide behind or take any of the pressure. This was time to grow and to help Mr. O grow. Before we do, let's remind ourselves of what Musonius Rufus said about behavior, virtue, and how to conduct oneself always. "For I believe a good king is from the outset and by necessity a philosopher, and the philosopher is from the outset a kingly person." I'll remind you of those words at the end of today's post as we all go out into the world to live our lives. I called my boss at my office and I explained the situation, and fortunately he was a great guy who understood how passionate and how serious I was about my training. He also never ever had any preconceived conceptions as to my personality or my intelligence, simply taking me as he saw me and how I performed at work. So I really respected this man, and suffice to say, we're still friends to this day. I told my parents, and my dad said he'd like to come along to have a look around the shops in Birmingham while I trained and to keep me company on the drive, which was great, as those drives coming back from Birmingham were bordering on the dangerous. After leg day in particular, I remember nearly every single time after leg day, my quads and my hamstrings would just start to cramp, and there was no stopping it when it was coming on. Can you imagine doing 70 miles an hour going down the M5 knowing your hamstring's just about to go into a full cramp? I was desperately trying to get over into the hard lane to wait for the cramps to kick in, and I would lie there in agony, screaming but laughing at the same time, waiting for it to wear off. And then there was a tiredness which always kicked in a couple of hours after the session, and especially after the big meal Kenny and I would always have afterwards in the food court. So I got an early night and got plenty of sleep, ready to set out early. Enough time to get there in plenty of time for the workout. I wasn't going to be late. The drive up was easy enough, which wasn't always the case on the M5. I've been told it still was bad, if not worse today. Anyway, we arrived in the multi-story and I arranged to meet my dad about midday in Temple Gym, thinking if we kicked off at around 10:30, 10:45, we'd be done in an hour at the most. The training sessions normally lasted 45, 50 minutes, except leg day, which could take up to an hour. I took my normal pre-workout stack for the days I trained legs and back, the ephedrine, caffeine and aspirin mix, and walked to Temple knowing the mix would be kicking in around the time we were kicking off. I had my back day outfit on. It's funny, we all had particular clothes we wore on certain body part days, especially legs and back. Leg day was a pair of platinum baggy, a gold's gym rag top, which was around 6XL, and a vest underneath, which I never got down to, and an Ottomix trainers. I had on my back day outfit, which was again a pair of baggies, but NPC ones, another rag top. It read huge by choice on it. I'd seen Vince Taylor wear one in Flex magazine one month, and I loved it. So when I saw the rag top in workout world, I snapped it up. I had a vest and an NPC jacket, which was beautiful. It wasn't one of the leather ones, but the material one. And it was beautiful. They were available in great colours. Dorian had a great red one, but I had a grey and a black one. And walking along the street to Temple, my mind was already in the zone. I don't think I even noticed anyone who passed me, any of the stares or the parting of the crowds as though I walked along. But before I knew it, I was outside the locked door of Temple Gym and stood leaning against the wall, waiting for the big BMW to turn up with the plates DAY on. It was the only treat Dorian had given himself and Debbie after winning the Olympia. He had bought both him and Debbie matching BMWs and beautiful watches each. His a beautiful Rolex watch, which I really admired. It's beautiful. One day, I knew, one day I'd have one. Actually, that reminds me of the time Dorian had to go through town and pick up something either from the chemist. I think it was from Boots the chemist. It may have been photos from his last weekend's prep photos. He always took each week leading into the O. Anyway, he had to rush through town, and I remember seeing him leave Temple Street, and it was like the parting of the Red Sea. The street was packed, yet there was a huge 315-pound bodybuilder walking quickly down the street, and the crowds were just part like the Red Sea was part as he rushed to get to Boots the chemist. Anyway, the big black car turned around the corner into the side street, and there was parking available for only 2 cars. And you can bet no one else was going to park their car outside of Temple Gym, knowing Dorian was in the gym. Well, then a second car came round the corner. Debbie had come in today, as she often did, to man the counter and the reception when there was no cover available. And she always made sure we weren't interrupted by anyone. Back then, There were people who came from all over the world to Temple to try and watch Dorian train. And although I understood some had travelled from Japan, from the States, Dorian wasn't going to have his workout interrupted by anyone, not even to be watched. He got out of his car, nodded his head, unlocked the door, and he walked downstairs, followed afterwards by Debbie. I followed, and then we went downstairs to get ready. Down to the dungeon. Debbie went behind the reception to get everything in order. The gym didn't officially open until 12 anyway, but a few regulars would sometimes come in at about 11 or 11:30, and that was fine as they all knew the rules and the etiquette. But it was really just in case any strangers came in that she was there. Now, when I had trained on my own there, I obviously had always paid. But when I'd come in with Dorian and Kenny, we'd all just carried on as though it was our own gym. But with Debbie at the counter, I didn't want to disrespect anyone by assuming I didn't have to pay to train. I dropped my bag off and I went to the desk. I said good morning to Debbie and to pay her for the training. And she just smiled and said to me, Paul, when you train with Dorian, you stop paying. I guess that meant I was officially on the team then. Dorian was already stretching, so I began to get warmed up too. He used some light dumbbells for some bicep curls, some side lateral raises, some rear delts, and stretches up on his lower body. He was surprisingly flexible for a man close to 315, 320 pounds. He was able to go into a full hurdle stretch easily, and his shoulder flexibility was very good too. It was a lesson to me. I rarely stretched back then, but you can guarantee I started stretching after that. I noticed that Debbie had put the cassette player on, and today was another one of Dorian's favourite albums that we often had played on chest days. It was Keep the Faith by Bon Jovi. The first track, Believe, was cranked up loud and the workout was about to begin. Time for war again. Here we go. Here we go, B, I was thinking. It's time to give everything you've got. Don't leave this gym with anything left in the tank. He then began to load up the old Nautilus pullover machine. I'd seen him use this before, and I'd attempted to use it too, and was surprised how heavy a relatively small amount of weight felt on it. The cams and pulleys were super efficient on this old bit of kit. But in all honesty, I've never yet used another one even close to the same effectiveness as this original plate-loaded one. It was a sensational piece of kit. Why no one's tried to replicate that machine today, I'll never know. Unless the machine's pulley system is perhaps under a patent or something like that. I don't know. Well, he loaded up a couple of plates, a couple of 50-kilo plates on and a couple of smaller ones. But I didn't even bother to ask what was on there. It didn't matter. If Dorian thought that's what you could handle, then that was the weight you were going to handle. He looked at me, gave me a nod, and just said, first warm-up. Don't go anywhere near failure or exhaustion. Just get the muscles warm and the mind engaged. He sat in and he ripped out an easy 12 or 15 with ease, very fluid, very smooth, like he'd done the movement a million times over, which he probably had. I sat in and he helped move the bar into position, and away I went. It felt fairly heavy, but nothing I couldn't handle with relative ease for about 10 or 12 reps. It felt really good, and my lats were already getting a pump. The muscle almost seemed to cramp when you're in the fully engaged position, the fully contracted position, where you squeezed your elbows back and into your stomach. I was hitting my back muscles like I never had done before. And this was just the first set of the first exercise. Back had always been a body part that I'd always struggled with to get a good growth out of, and a good feeling in too. So I had a feeling that this session was going to change everything. And I wasn't wrong. The next set was also a warm-up set. He added another couple of plates to the machine And once again, his form was perfect. Smooth but powerful concentric portion of the rep with a slower, controlled eccentric part under full control. You could tell he was building his mind-muscle connectivity for the full working set to come, when full power would be exerted and a very explosive positive part of the movement would be employed with a peak contraction at the bottom at the same controlled position with a negative controlled smoothly all the way back. Next it was my turn. I took a plate off and again followed his example, but this time it did feel very heavy. But I worked through and I got 10 reps, making sure I didn't go to failure, but I wasn't far away, to be perfectly honest. The working set was on. Dorian chose his working set. It seemed an ungodly amount of weight on that Nautilus machine, but he squeezed himself down into the machine. Now that wasn't easy considering the mass of that man at the time. And he called out 3, 2, 1, and I finished the countdown as I helped him bring the bar to the starting position, where the lats are fully stretched, and then he exploded downwards. The forces involved were frightening. Literally, potentially muscle tearing, tendon splitting explosive power. But it was so fully on the belly of the muscle, you could tell there was nothing at work but those lats. A huge contraction at the bottom of the rep, with a millisecond hold and squeeze before lowering back under total control to a full stretch. Absolutely mind-blowing intensity and strictness of form. It was truly awesome. After 7 or 8 reps, he was slowing down near the fully contracted position, so I kept my hands on just to make sure, just in case he needed a slight touch to get the machine right to the bottom. He got the 8th, and then the 9th, with the last 2 inches needing a slight bit of assistance, and then I could see in his eyes that the 10th was on. So I let him take the machine fully back and then stayed close to him just to give the tiniest of touches to complete the full 10 reps. Exhausted, he was happy, and I was relieved I hadn't messed up his spotting. There wasn't any time to think back then, though. These were just thoughts that came to me afterwards, and I'm trying to recall how it all was back then. It was my time to go balls to the wall myself and get my working set done. In I went, squeezing down into the machine. I myself was 310 pounds back then. And with just one extra 10 kilo plate loaded on top of my last set's weight, I had in my head a full set of 10 reps I was going to perform with perfect form, mimicking his form and style, controlling the negative and then explosively transitioning into the concentric part of the rep, and squeeze the lats with everything I had at the peak part of the movement. As the bar was at my waist, the first 5 reps seemed very heavy, but I was managing. The change in style, doing the reps properly, meant that the lats were performing all the work, which was what we both wanted. The 6th was even tougher. And then on to the 7th and the 8th, I found he had to assist me on the last couple of inches or so. But he said 2 more, and I followed and did them, giving everything I had to the movement. And just when I felt my lats begin to lose their power and connection, I saw that the bar was at my waist and the set had been completed. Time for a couple of deep breaths, and over we walked to the leg room, which was the back end of Temple Gym, where the squat rack and most of the leg equipment was kept, including where we did stiff leg deadlifts, a kind of platform, but it was also where we did barbell rows, underhand grip at that time. Later, after he tore his bicep, he would change his grip to both hands overhand grip, as it put less strep on the biceps tendon. But back then, he'd found that the underhand grip rows had really helped him develop his lower lats incredibly. So that's how we did them. I've also now changed too to an overhand grip as I've got older, just to take the stress off the biceps tendon. And it still feels a great exercise, but underhand grip style definitely felt much better in the lower lats for sure. Only one warm-up set of these, as the lats and biceps were already warm, so it was simply getting used to the movement again and preparing for the body for the huge amount of weight we would be using in our working sets. He began with 3 plates aside for 8 easy reps, and I took a plate off and I did a set of 8 reps, but they weren't easy. My lats were already exhausted by that pullover set. Anyway, into the working set. And Doz loaded up 4 plates and a biscuit. That's a 5 kilo plate as well. I did somewhere around 8 to 12 reps. I can't really remember exactly, but they were awesomely powerful. And at a 70-degree angle, he powered the bar into his waist with a squeeze at the top of the movement that I could even see visibly from the outside of his huge rack top when he was wearing. I loaded up 3 plates and a 10 kilo each side, as that was the way I was using at home for these. But as I got upright and began my first rep, he stopped me and said, "Take the weight down, lad, probably half it, and do it right." Shit, this was embarrassing. But was it? No. For sure I felt humbled by it, but he was helping me do the exercise properly, helping me grow. So for any of you out there who are advised by people more experienced than you and who have got results that you want, they're trying to help you when they're advising you like this. It's not an ego contest. Lose that at the front door and take the advice. And when you try it and it works, then thank them for their interrupting you to show you. They could have just walked past, but they stopped and went out of their way to help you change what was wrong, to help make you grow. I've done it myself, and the person involved has either just stared blankly back at me as though I'm coming from Mars, or they say thanks and they just continue what they were doing before the same way, and now, well, you try. Anyway, I did what he said, and I dropped my weights in half, and then made sure I was at the 70-degree angle perfectly, and pulled with my elbows, engaging the lats properly, and pulled the bar into my waist just as he had done. "Good job, lad," he said. My body was shattered, and we'd only just done 2 exercises. I think I'll Sleep When I'm Dead was playing now. I think if I remember that album, it was about 3 tracks in. So the music was rocking and blasting out the speakers. It's amazing how good those old cassette tapes were back then, before we had CDs. That was a great album. It was a great training album too. The interesting thing about that change of form was that within a month I was pulling 3.5 plates again, but this time properly, with the form that he had showed me. It wasn't that I had got that much stronger, although I had got quite a bit stronger, but it was also getting used to the movement, doing it correctly. And once engaged, my lats took the work and they started to grow big time. A weak body part became a strong body part. All it took was a little humility and some gut-wrenching effort. Then it was over to the other side of the gym to the new Hammer Strength seated isolateral row machine. The machine had just been sent over from the States, where Dorian had used one, I think, first with Mike Mensa, and he loved it so much he'd ordered one for Temple. It was a sensational machine. It's strange, but the newer models today don't seem to have the same feeling or hit the lats the same as the first models do. I don't know why. I've tried quite a few in different gyms, all Hammer Strength, and all the seated isolateral rows, but the arc that the handle pulls through just seems to be different than the original one. It's the same with the stack-loaded Nautilus pullover. The stack ones never felt the same as the plate-loaded original that we had in Temple. Anyway, you'll know the formula by now. Yes, 1 warm-up set followed by 1 working set. A superb machine. This allowed us to focus completely on each lat at a time, with a handle to hold on to support the body with the alternating free hand while you're doing the set. Working sets were 4 plates and a biscuit for Dorian each arm, with a steady explosive positive part of the rep, followed by a peak contraction at the very top part, where you squeeze the lat back as far as possible and then steadily return the negative under control to go again with the same arm until that side was exhausted, and then complete the other arm before switching turns, and it was me in the set. I had to take a plate off and the 5 kilos, as my max was only 3 plates for each arm for 8 to 10 good, clean, full force, full intensity, maximum power, maximum contraction reps until each fibre had been completely exhausted on each side. My body was feeling like it had been hit by a truck by now, but we moved on only a few feet away to where the lat row was, and we fixed the pull down bar to the carabiner clip instead of the V pulley handle that we did seated rows. We used a long pull down bar with a grip where the bar just angles out slightly, so roughly about a shoulder width apart. Temple's pull down stack was crazy heavy, but we had a superbly smooth action. We did tricep push downs on this machine as well as lat pull downs as well. But today, seated rows were the order of the workout. Seated upright, we allowed the weight to bring us forward at the hip, stretching the lats under control before again explosively pulling the bar towards the stomach, pulling the elbows back as far as possible, engaging the lats, driving with the lats, so the elbows finish back behind our bodies. It wasn't easy to get to know the weight stack, so it took a few visits to know what weight was roughly right for each exercise on here. But after one quick warm-up, it was full on for a punishing set of heavy, seated rows with a wide grip, engaging the lats fully as we did so. We would try and get a couple of force reps on this one as well, so a tiny touch on the bar at the point of the carabiner did the trick with a small touch, just enough to get an extra inch or two of movement on the last 2 reps. Our lats were blown, but there was more to come. You see, on back day, we made sure we hit the lumbar region of the lower back as well as the rear delts and deadlifts too. Dorian felt that rear delts were so heavily engaged in every back movement that it made sense just to finish them off there and then, and do them on back day rather than on shoulder day, like most people did back then. So firstly, it was over to bent over dumbbell raises. Stood, bent over at the waist, we did rear lateral raises to annihilate the fibres of the rear delts. I'd done these seated before, but Dorian had us stood, bent over and raised the dumbbells as far back behind our delts as possible, and then down to gently touch at the bottom. He did these really heavy. I can't remember the amount of weight on the dumbbells for these, but they were huge dumbbells. It was really heavy. Something like 65-pound dumbbells or something near it. I was down at the 40, 45 pounds, and even they seemed super heavy. But I went down and raised those 45s for as many reps as I could, and extended the set by, when I couldn't get full reps, I'd get half reps, and then half reps, I'd get quarter reps. At the quarter reps, it was inches, until I couldn't do any more. We were done. Oh no, we weren't. Hyperextensions. So back over to the leg room right next to the hamstring curl machine was a hyperextension bench. 2 sets of weighted hyperextensions did the job. Controlled descent, as with everything, and then drive the upper body up to horizontal, and a squeeze of the lumbar region at the top where the body is horizontal, and we were holding a fixed barbell in place behind our heads. It wasn't super heavy. It was only about maybe 30 pounds or so. The details are gone, sadly, exactly how much we used on it on each exercise, but the sound, the force and the feel of the intensity never leaves me. Holding the barbell behind your head, you lifted yourself up to horizontal, squeezed the lower back for a millisecond, and then controlling the weight down, you went again until the lower back was exhausted and blown. My back from the traps to the lumbar region was in pieces by now. But we walked just 4 feet over to the platform again, where we'd just done our barbell rows, and loaded up the barbell with 4 plates aside, where he was going to do his warm-up set for deadlifting. Right, deadlifting, last exercise on back day. I'm not sure whereabout in the workout it was played, but my favourite song on that album was Blame It on the Love of Rock and Roll. And I'm sure it was near the end of the workout. It was probably blaring when we were doing these deadlifts. It may seem strange that Bon Jovi was on our playlist back then. You know, back at my gym, I was playing everything from Slayer to AC/DC to pre-army Elvis to Metallica. But that was a superb album. Even the slower songs were kind of emotionally packed, so every song just worked perfectly with this insanely intense heavy-duty workout. Now, it's important that I try and make it clear how he did deadlifts, as I've seen people deadlifting for many years, and never has anyone deadlifting with as much control as Dorian did with them. A powerlifting movement for many that they begin their back workouts with, we finished our back workouts with them, thereby limiting the amount of weight we were able to use, making it safer but still getting the maximum gains from the movement. And we made sure that the bar never touched the platform at the bottom of the rep. We controlled it all the way down to about mid-shin and drive it back up and squeeze every muscle in our back at the top. The tension from bottom to top. And we kept going for as many as we can, 6, 7, 8 reps. These were proper bodybuilding deadlifts. And if I saw more people doing them this way, I'm sure we'd see better backs on stage as a result. Why on earth would a bodybuilder try and see how much he can deadlift for 1 or 3 reps when we're trying to get the back muscles to grow, not to gain strength? Again, it's an ego thing. Yes, if you can lift big weights on this exercise, yeah, great, you know, but are you building a better back with them? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Show me a better back than Dorian Yates's back, and then I'll say, go ahead and do them first, and for low reps, go ahead. But I don't think you'll find me someone very easily. Just remember this, as Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, said, you get what you deserve. Instead of being a good person today, you choose instead to become one tomorrow. Wise words. We all get to choose to be a good person tomorrow. Be one. Don't follow the rest. Society is breaking down in front of our eyes. We need great men and great women like never before. And each one of us who chooses to be a great person will make a difference. No matter what anyone else may do, be virtuous, hold integrity dear, be honourable, be noble, and tell the truth. If we all do this, then at least our tiny little pieces of the world can be worthy, good places to live, and bring up the next generation. Okay, back to deadlifts. Dorian's form was perfect on these. With an overhand grip, with both hands on the bar, he lifted the weight smoothly and controlled from top to bottom. But when I say bottom, like I said, he never touched the platform ever. The lowest he went was kind of around mid-shin to keep the tension isolated completely on his back muscles and away from his legs. I used just 3 plates a side for my warm-up. I used to do stiff leg deadlifts with 3 plates a side. Now that shows you how exhausted we were by this point. And where Dorian used 5 plates and a half on his working set, I could only manage 4 plates with a 5 on each side. But to see how he did those reps, his back was under massive tension and stress. From the very first rep until the very last rep, there was no disruption for the tension on his back at all. It was under tension all the time. You know, you can see his back training on YouTube. If you look up blood and guts back workout, the training partner who took over from Kenny, Leroy Davis, in 1994, they recorded Blood and Guts. And you can see Dorian's form and his style on deadlifts in that video, the way you do them. And if you can do 5 plates a side this way, you'll already have a good, strong back, I guarantee you. And last in your workout, don't forget that part. And that was it. Another back workout in the bag, but one that taught me many things and made my back sore like it never had been ever. I had engaged the muscles properly for the very first time in my training career. In that workout, So from that moment on, I would always use the same form and intensity, and suddenly my back was no longer a lagging body part, but one that I was ready to present to the judges each year afterwards. At the end, that's when we would crash down onto the bench and relax, get a drink and chat. Those moments of relaxing with Dorian after a huge workout like that were moments I'll never forget. It's funny, but I think the last track on that album was A Little Bit of Soul, and I always seem to remember crashing and relaxing with that song being played. So it must have been around the kind of the 50-minute mark or something like that. It was a relaxed song, so it was quite appropriate. It was in these chats that the Mr. Olympia title fell from his persona, and we would just talk about anything, mostly bodybuilding related, but we talk about what show I was going to do that year, to different supplements. That would always include what he was taking as a post-workout drink then. If you remember, when I first trained with Dorian, or I first saw him in Temple, he always took a spoonful of Musashi amino acid powder with a carb drink as his post-workout drink. But by this point, he had been given a new product, a new powder already in a sachet, which he invited me to try and which I intended buying from him in a big black dustbin bag as it had been imported over from the States. It was a new protein carb drink mix, and it came over from, I think, from a doctor that specialized in the burns unit and who had developed this formula for burns patients to try and keep them as anabolic as possible and to reduce the amount of muscle loss they encountered during their recovery from the burns. The product was called MetRx. It was new to me and anyone else in the UK at that time. Dorian had been sent some over and had found it had noticeably improved his physique, taking it as a post-workout supplement. Now, for a supplement to actually have a noticeable effect on your body is extremely rare, as most supplements back then and today probably are kind of placebos or basic milk and egg protein powder mixes. But this, with its 2-to-1 protein to carb ratio, I think it had like 42 grams of protein, 23 grams of carbs, with a tiny amount of fat, maybe 2 or 3 grams in it. It actually did aid our recovery. And not only that, it tasted fantastic. I couldn't believe how good it tasted. Every powder back then tasted pretty terrible or just barely drinkable, but this stuff was like drinking vanilla dessert. I don't know if the product around today is the same as the one back in like 93, but the original formula was outstanding in performance and taste. I remember I used it right up to the last 2 weeks before my British qualifier that year, and it really helped knowing I was going to have one of these every day as part of my diet. I remember I used to mix it up with very little water so it would blend up really thick, and then I would put it in the fridge to kind of set like a dessert, and it would keep me sane while I got shredded for the Wessex qualifier in September that year. In fact, Dorian gave me a nice present to help me with my prep the following year. I'll put it on the screen for you to show you. It's one of the photos from his 1993 prep from the Flex magazine, the black and white photos. And he wrote on there, "Get freaky shredded, Paul. Dorian." Thanks, Dorian. I did. And it got me through to the British finals, where you guest posed just after winning your third Mr. Olympia victory in Georgia. Anyway, back to the chats and the post-workout drinks. He said he tried using just a carb drink originally, and then he tried the Musashi amino acids with a carb drink, which he felt had been an improvement. But he said that even he had noticed a difference with this new MetRx powder since he'd started taking it. The only problem was that Dorian obviously was sponsored by Weider at the time, so he couldn't be seen to be endorsing anyone else's product. So he couldn't really tell anybody about it, or be seen in a photograph with it, or be seen by Weider to be using it. So MetRx had sent black bin liners of bags through full of this sachets for him to use as free, as a gesture of goodwill, because they knew he wouldn't be able to show it, or they knew they weren't going to get anything back from him drinking it. Except that once we all knew Then word started to get around about this great new drink from America. And once it arrived here, it really took off quickly. And it blew the competition away for a good couple of years. I think Dr. Scott Connolly was the name of the doctor who came up with the original formula. And I'm not sure the formula is exactly the same as the original one, but the original one was awesome and everyone wanted it and couldn't get hold of it at the time. And we'd chat for as long as he felt like it. Some days it was well over an hour, but if it did go on too late, at some point he would always get a call from home if Debbie wasn't there, if he wasn't back for his first solid meal, post-workout meal, as Debbie would always call to tell him to get back home because it was ready and to make sure he ate it and make sure he'd go to sleep afterwards. This day, though, Debbie was here, so we all chatted together. She's a lovely lady, and I was surprised and saddened when they separated after he retired, but they seemed to work like the perfect team. But maybe having him forced to retire put them through all sorts of things. Who knows? Whatever it was, I hope she's still very well. Well, more about what Dorian did in his afternoons, I think, in another blog post, as it was the subject of rumour and gossip for years. You see, he would disappear for 2 hours every afternoon. No one would be able to contact him, and he was never available for anyone. What was he doing? Some magic or special ritual or medical treatment or protocol that was kept highly secret and under guard? Well, stay tuned and I'll tell you exactly what he was doing for those 2 hours every day after his workout back in those days. Well, I can't leave you dangling on that, can I? Okay, the rumours were rife. He was hooking himself up to an IV drip with a mixture of growth hormone and blood was one suggestion. Another one was he had to have dialysis every 2 hours because his kidneys have failed. And then there was a one suggesting a new secret product was being fed into him via an IV drip. I don't know what the fascination was with IV drips back then. But anyway, strangely enough, I had the same rumours going around about myself back then. I can't remember the number of times I'm supposed to have died, had liver failure, kidney transplants, or heart attacks. But sadly for them, and luckily for me, I was happy and healthy, and so was Dorian. What was he doing after his post-workout meal at home? Every day afternoon, he was taking a 2-hour nap. That's what he was doing. The best thing he could possibly have done for his recovery was the thing he was doing. He was sleeping for 2 hours. That plus his 8 hours at night meant he was getting close to 10 hours of sleep each day on training days, and boy, was he growing. I forgot to tell you something that just happened just before we finished our workout that day. That was funny, but also gives you an insight into how seriously we were training back then. Earlier, I'd said my father had accompanied me up to Birmingham that day as he was wanting to look through bookshops up there, as he loved going through second-hand bookshops for novels he'd never read or rare books that he was looking for and had never found. Anyway, he left me at the car and we'd arranged to meet at Temple Gym at midday, as I assumed we'd be completely finished training by then. Starting at 10:30, normally an hour was all we needed for back. But that day, for some reason, Dorian and Debbie had arrived a little bit later than normal, so we kicked off a little bit later. Just another few words about Debbie. She was lovely. A lot of people found her a bit protective of Dorian in terms of not letting anyone near him, but that was just her looking out for her husband, as she knew so many people would want to try and get to him for business offers or trying to ask him questions, not even considering he was working out. So she was just protecting him and making sure his training environment was always perfect and that no one bothered him or distracted him in any way. For that day, we were still training at midday when my father arrived and came down the stairs. All he could hear were screams and weights clanging. Anyway, so he got to the bottom of the stairs. Obviously, because he's in casual clothes and obviously he's not going to be training, Debbie quickly got out of the counter and rushed up to him and said to him, "Please don't look at them. Please don't distract them in any way. Can you just sit down and just be quiet?" As they're getting ready for the Olympia, and they're still training. Well, my father was a bit kind of shocked, but he explained who he was, and when he explained he was my father, Debbie apologized profusely, just explaining that people were coming from all over the world at that time, even like Japan, Australia, to try and just watch Dorian train, and she was just looking out for us. My father, I think, was a bit taken aback, as I don't think he had really thought much of this bodybuilding business up to then, but maybe that moment made him realize I was pretty serious about what I was doing, and maybe I was pretty good at it too. Who knows? Sadly, he passed it a number of years ago now, but he got to see me do a whole heap of things, and hopefully I haven't disappointed him too much. That actually is a very good point to thread out a little bit to others outside of our industry. Bodybuilding may appear a very strange and egocentric sport. From the outside, all you think you see is men and women parading themselves on a stage in a very strange tan, wearing a swimming costume, hitting pose after strange pose, lined up against other men and other women who are also doing the same strange pose after strange pose. Well, I guess thinking about it like that, it even sounds odd to me, but that really is what the general public envisage when they think of bodybuilders. Or perhaps they think of someone who's kind of like a meathead. I've certainly had that presupposition given to me plenty of times in the past. Why do people think that just because we enjoy lifting weights that we are unintelligent? Well, that's judgment for you. And before we all start saying how bad it is, you've got to remember that we all judge people all the time. Okay, it's not always consciously, but I guarantee you, your brain is subconsciously making judgments about the people around you all the time. It has to. We've evolved to be able to have to make snap judgment decisions on whether someone's a threat or not. Evolutionary speaking, way back on the savannah or in medieval times, or even now, we have to make instant decisions and judgments about people for safety and for how we try and plot the world around us. And as a huge guy, historically, we would have kind of been given a warning signal to the brains of many people if we were in unknown territory, as this huge man may be about to rob you, attack you, or even kill you. Evolutionary biology explains many of these so-called preconceptions. And although they're very wrong often, most people are smart enough not to take their first impressions as the informed truth. We can be generous enough, though, to understand why they may feel that way initially. And then it's down to us to show them the error of that preconception. I remember when I first started university after my accident, okay, I was disabled, but I still had this body, and that's difficult to hide. Well, it was then. Although I had intentionally lost a lot of weight to reduce the pain in my hips and my spine, but if you saw my forearms even, you'd know that I trained, or there was something underneath this shirt that wasn't quite normal for most people. So to avoid being preconceived as unintelligent and as a meathead, I wore a suit to university every single day. I always wore long sleeve shirts and a jacket and a waistcoat as well. It worked beautifully. Although some people still did ask me if I trained or was I a para-athlete, I was accepted in the world of academia as any newbie scholar would be. Now 10 years later, and after 2 degrees and at the start of my PhD shortly, I will now show up on an online lecture with a short sleeve shirt. Very daring. Although I haven't quite gone all the way to a t-shirt yet. Actually, it's funny thinking about it, I've never been on here in a t-shirt yet for a blog post either. Oh well, for those of you who are kind of interested in how I do look today, I will put up a few training videos to show you so you can see what I'm looking like. And for those of you interested in how I train today, being disabled and with my mobility issues, then I will be posting videos of me in the gym training. Yes, I still train hardcore and still heavy duty, although not quite so much of the word heavy anymore. And I still only ever do one set to failure. I don't think I could ever go back to volume training again now. And considering how much I'm not able to do, I think I'm holding up okay. I'm still breathing, and that's the most important thing to me these days. Do I care what my body looks like now? Not in the slightest. I haven't for years. I found that even at the end when I was competing, I was kind of analysing my physique for how a judge would look for it, not caring about how other people may view my body. So does my body look good or nice? I couldn't care less. Obviously, I'd like to think other people thought I looked well and healthy and friendly and a nice person, but have I got abs or not? Those days are long gone. But the abs aren't gone, funnily enough. It's like Aurelius said, in your actions, don't procrastinate. In your conversations, don't confuse. In your thoughts, don't wander. In your soul, don't be passive or aggressive. In your life, don't be all about business. Don't be all about one thing, friends. I learned early on in life that I was of an obsessive personality. Whatever I did, I had to do to the best of my abilities, or not at all. Now, some would say, oh, that's great because it will make you really good at what you choose to do. But what if I chose a behavior or an action that's a negative one? Well, then I'm in big trouble. For I can guarantee you, I would be the best at whatever is negative there was. If I got into drugs, I would be in the gutter before the year was through. If I got into telling lies, I'd be the biggest loser in town. If I was into playing around, I'd have more women than I knew how to handle. So what do? If you think you are of an obsessive personality, then you have to ensure that everything you do, everything is positive. Then whatever you get obsessive about can only have positive consequences and results. For example, I am obsessive now about my work, my research. When I do a research on a piece of work or an article that I'm writing, I will read everything there is to read about the subject. If it's an author, I will research them to the point where I could write a biography about that person. Because I find new information that results in the latest biographies becoming out of date. I love my work, but I have been trying to trim down my research a little, especially now I've got the website and the videos to produce and to write and to record. But then again, it may also give you confidence and faith in that whatever I say to you about a subject, you know I would have researched it first and experienced it fully or experienced it firsthand. It will never be something that I haven't given a lot of thought to. For example, relationships are something that I've always been able to have easily with people. I get on well with people easily, nearly everyone. And I love people, but I observe also, and I see so many unhappy people around. Why? I don't know for sure, but I think I may have some clues as to where the answers or where the answers may lie. So in between this and next week's post, I'm going to share with you another video of my thoughts on relationships, especially those between husband or wife or boyfriend and girlfriend or whatever significant other is in your life, and some thoughts as to how they can go wrong, how they can go right, how to choose the right ones, why men need to consider very carefully how they behave in life and with women, and why women need to consider very carefully how they behave in life, and why and what can result if mistakes are made that needn't have been made. I've got a lifetime of relationships behind me and a successful, well, up to this video anyway, marriage of nearly 30 years. So I've made mistakes and I've learned some answers, and hopefully I can save you from making some of those mistakes that I made, and perhaps explain some of the things I got right and that I learned, and why I think they are so vital to a successful long-term union. You know, I will say this. I do believe marriage is the best way of joining two people together in a way that hopefully holds them together for life. But that one relationship should not be just staying together for the sake of your children or because you're too afraid not to be together. All marriages will have their ups and downs, but communication is the key to working through issues and disagreements and differences. It can't always be magical and mystical, but it really should be at times, no matter if you've been married for 30 years, and it should present you with challenges and uncertainties. Who wants to be with someone who is a pushover, where they agree with everything that you do? Oh, you think you would? No, seriously, you would be bored with that relationship within weeks. You want somebody who will challenge your word, who will challenge your actions, hold you to account, hold you to your very best values, to your absolute very best that you can possibly do. That, my friends, is the partner that you should be seeking. Anyway, but more on that during the week. Remembering back from my years through the gyms I've trained in for 40 years and the nightclubs I worked in for over 10 years. Boy, let me tell you, I've seen some of life's very worst behaviors in nightclubs at times. I've also worked them and never went to them, as I never wanted to, as what I saw and I had to resolve working in a nightclub was enough to put me off ever going into one. Well, that and life over 55 years, I can tell you the very worst and the very best of human behaviors. Tune in and listen to what those years in the gyms and the clubs have taught me. Whether we know it or not, evolutionary psychology has shown that there are particular patterns to what is involved in mate choosing decisions for a man, for those of a woman. Many of them, they won't surprise you, but I think you'll find them interesting to hear and possibly helpful to consider if you're single and you wish to be in a long-term relationship. Short-term relationships are not good for either men or women. Why? I'll explain more in the next video, but it's not that I'm a religious prude, but more because I'm a man who wants other people to find true success in their lives. And by that I mean living out your true purpose here on this planet. You, me, each of us are all capable of great things. Do them, please. Let's make a choice to be the best of who we can be this day and tomorrow and each day after. As Seneca told us many years ago, anything that must be done, virtue can do with courage and promptness. I choose to read the Stoics because their philosophies have always worked for me in my darkest times. When I've been in hospital, in pain, my body broken and my mind numb. When I thought that what my life's purpose was taken from me. I read them and they showed me that it was always my choice how to react and how to think. No, I couldn't change what had happened to me, but I could change what it meant to me and my thinking. So instead of thinking my career was over, it was simply a case of thinking, oh no, that's wrong. A new one is just opening up. Of course, it wasn't that easy. I had many dark months, but the reading did seep through eventually. And now I wouldn't change what I'm doing for anything. You are the project. The raw material for the work of a good and excellent person is their own guiding reason. The body is that of the doctor and the physical trainer, and the farm, the farmers. So before I discuss relationships with you this week, I'll make a start by offering you this one piece of advice. So I'll leave you with the beautiful words from Marcus Aurelius. Do not argue what a good man is, be one. And I don't have to say that if you're female, you should simply switch the words. Do not argue what a good woman should be one. Let's raise our bars, friends, and aim higher. Thank you for listening and watching. I'll see you again for another memory from the golden era of bodybuilding next week. Stay true, stay virtuous, be a leader, and remember, friends, there are always 3 more reps in you. Goodbye, I'll see you soon.